We just need to be clear. We're not saying, Councillor Wood, we can't do that, but we just need to talk to Bill English, the Prime Minister, and the relevant ministers, and as part of the work that the Mayor's doing, and hopefully including councillors, lobbying and meeting directly with government to say we need a serious slug of money here to address our transport issues. We just need to do it straight with Wellington. Is that not the process that's underway? Okay.
Well, why do we put down here financing through partnerships? Surely that's a partnership, and I would have thought that we should be explaining that particular partnership, which has been had a huge impact on Auckland's transport infrastructure over the last 10 years. And I can rattle off all the projects that have been helped through by that extra money. It was a major boost to Auckland.
So
Andrew,
we reached the same conclusion that Councillor Wood's done, that there is a case for the government to have a role in financing some of the investment required to support the growth in Auckland, and that's discussed in I've got different numbers, but there's an entire section called Central Government Role in Financing Infrastructure. Oh, you've got the right number, 133 to 137. It's also referenced in the recommendations we make, where we talk about that in the context of water and wastewater, because the government doesn't make a contribution in that space at the moment, but we suggest that that may be an area where they can. Obviously, they do have a direct role in financing elements of the transport infrastructure, and the COO and the CPO have been involved in the discussions about seeking to expand that, possibly in the areas that Councillor Wood referred to. So we've got the same conclusions as you, and we've put them in the report for the same reasons. Certainly, some of that role could be in a partnering role, which we then extend to discuss in the next section. So we agree with you, and we've got that in there for the same reasons.
Well, can you quote what they've done in the past? what they've done in the last decade? I think that would be helpful. Continue that alliance between Auckland and central government.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we can, for clarity, add in a for instance, just to remind central government that big slugs of money have come our way in the past and would be good to have them again. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, I was there at the workshop, and I'm just trying to recall some of the discussion there, but certainly around user charges as it goes to transport. I identified the need to look at broader mechanisms, and they could include, for example, a tax per kilometre travelled along the lines of the tax per mile that a large number of states in the United States are looking at, and they are mechanisms that that leapfrog these old technologies like the camera technology that's presently in place. And they also provide a mechanism for government to shift away from the tax on petrol, which is in decline relatively.
So you asking if we put this directly in here, Councillor, or if that's envisaged the point that we raise?
It could and should go in here, I would suggest, as an option. We're defining things quite narrowly here, and similarly, while we might have had some community support for a motorway user charge, that was a rather biased question and answer process that I think we had there. That's my perspective anyway.
Well, something could be phrased to suggest that here's a couple of things that we've discussed and are keen on in Auckland, and there should continue to be exploration of other innovative ways of funding transport through different forms of user charge mechanism, which then opens it up to anything that anyone can think of, and doesn't just say A and B.
Yeah.
Okay. No, good point.
Through the chair, that's probably paragraphs 145 and 147. We can just clarify that, because that already talks about new funding mechanisms for transport and continuing to work with government.
Good. And we just wondered with 16 on page 32, with 15 on page 32, just picking up Councillor Quax's point, we can add something like, as well as joint investigation and innovative ways of funding, infrastructure funding, using some overseas examples. So it's just saying, why don't we look at that then?
The Councillor Quax's suggestion was looked at by the Productivity Commission.
Right.
It took me 10 minutes to find it in their document, but I just did. And they say that that MUDs can be done with the key financing element of municipal utility districts that you referred to can be achieved with the targeted rates we've got available, the mechanism we can legally do right now. So, and that's one of the things that our submission also refers to supporting for the same reasons that you did. Whether we can achieve it in New Zealand just depends on the scale of developments that might come to us. So we've got that stuff in there for the same reasons. Thanks.
Right.
The other matter that
Councillor
I'll just
Walker.
raise is just around 144, which is around regulation of water services. My general view is that regulation of a number of really important forms of infrastructure, and I'm referring to broadband, where the economy in Auckland have suffered disastrously because of the, frankly, lack of regulation to put that in place. Similarly applies to water. I mean, we could and should have digital watering for water as a mechanism for water care to more effectively regulate and particularly conserve the supply of water and defer capital.
Okay.
This is, I think, the sort of regulation that was being implied here wasn't a requirement to have a particular way of metering water. I felt that it was more about the sort of price control and input into infrastructure investments that might apply to Vector, for example, and in which case my recommendation was that we didn't support that because Vector makes a profit, and whereas Watercare doesn't, and so you'd be incurring quite a lot of cost to regulate them without too much perhaps on the benefit side. So that was a different kind of regulation than what Councillor Walker was referring to.
I guess my concern, this notion that Watercare doesn't make a profit is somewhat misplaced. Watercare does make a profit. It doesn't distribute the profit. It reinvests that profit in its infrastructure. It doesn't necessarily have an incentive to conserve water or actually provide water on a sustainable basis for Auckland. That's a general concern that I put on the table. So we as a council are allowing the larger take of water outside our region, which is not in accord, frankly, with our low carbon plan or sustainable principles.
And Councillor, I don't think we can cover that in the Productivity Commission, this part of our Productivity Commission discussion, but like you, I share some of those concerns, and I would like us to pick that up with Watercare as part of our CCO discussion, because you are right, this is an issue that does need to be canvassed more widely. Councillor Fletcher, last word to you, and then we'll put the recommendation.
Make one more point. I'll be brief,
and
Madam
then
Chair.
Councillor Lee. Then we've got one more, just to let people know what's happening. We'll deal with the next item, and then we're going to take a break for lunch.
Thank
So,
you, Madam
Councillor
Chair. May I just, because I heard perhaps wrongly what you were suggesting in terms of the lobbying of government, but the Productivity Commission, along with Treasury, is really important. The Productivity Commission is an independent Crown entity that provides information that actually leads to policy. So it is important that we see contained in this the sort of information that we need to get government to change its policies for us. So on that point, it isn't just a lobbying exercise. But my query that I have, and maybe Andrew can speak to it for me, is around how the information on page 57 may be interpreted. Yesterday alone, we had we had the first step into the annual plan and a workshop around that. I would hate for the clauses under 163 to 166 to be a position that we're adopting that excludes, therefore, further debate into the annual planning processes on the issue of capital valuation. So could you just give me the comfort of knowing that this doesn't then define policy for us for the future because we've made the statements in this particular document?
I wouldn't see that procedurally it would stop you having that debate. I mean, even if we passed a council resolution today that said, well, one thing or the other, it can still be debated and changed again tomorrow. So, and we're not passing a resolution on this particular issue. We're just saying this is a submission, this is what we think. as a council, you can always change your mind on an issue, and therefore, if you agree to debate this further, it's there for you to do that.
So, Madam Chair, I'm supportive of this, but I actually just feel a little bit uncomfortable with those clauses on page 57.
Okay. No, that's acknowledged. Councillor Lee.
Just to be brief, Madam Chair, this is all about housing, but also the consequences of the disproportionate growth of Auckland in terms of cost of infrastructure. So, as I said before, we're already behind the 8 ball. We have been for decades, and now we have to accommodate more growth and therefore more infrastructure. And we're focusing on that. That's fair enough. But all our emphasis, I hear and see, has been on the demand side. Like user pays or motorway charges, which is going to get you, if we're going to be frank, bugger all in the scheme of things. We're dealing with the pressure is from the government and on the council and the unitary planners deregulate the land market, and that will help solve things. And now we have to deal with the consequences of that in terms of infrastructure. Forget all about the environmental stuff. Let's put that to one side. What is a common problem to the housing affordability issue and infrastructure, which go hand in hand, is a vertically integrated monopoly in the building sector, in building supplies, building materials, and we don't go there really at all. And I think if our infrastructure, forget about housing, because our housing is about 3 to 5 times the price of California, the building of the houses I'm talking about, I think that someone has to address this problem. If we're going to all the trouble with our high-powered officers writing these submissions, I think that needs to be taken into account as well. It shouldn't be a sacred cow or a no-go area. There is a vertically integrated monopoly on building materials in this country, and that impacts hugely on infrastructure. It's one of the reasons why a 3.4 kilometre city rail link tunnel costs $2.5 billion. That's way above the costs in any other country if you go and compare it or try to compare it. And I think we need to look at the supply side issue as well as the demand side. Thank you.
Councillor Lee, total agreement, and we're just saying I think we could strengthen that, and when we get to speak to our submission, I think that's a point to make. We're certainly tackling it on the house building, the actual physical house building side of things. We're looking at that supply chain as well. Completely agree. Okay. Right, we're just about there. Councillor Walker?
Yes, it's not to do with this item, but I did get an undertaking that Eden Park information would be distributed to us as early as possible. I still haven't got it.
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll get onto that right now. I'm going to put the recommendation, moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Cashmore, and Member Ngamane, your recommendation has been included in this, so you're comfortable with that? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.